good. The reason I like to start with something like that is um, so that it's good to when you can kind of know the strengths and weaknesses about those around you, it's easier to work with them. And a lot of times, I think that we're not necessarily. Let me put it this way: none of us are really that good about talking about the areas where we're weak. We like to talk about the areas where we're strong, and we like to give examples of that. But one of the greatest markers of a good leader is knowing your limits. I think it's one of the greatest things that anybody can ever know. Is some people, maybe we all have different names for them, but some people would refer to them as a know-it-all. They know everything about anything, and yet they really don't accomplish much. That's a dangerous place. And then because one day you'll wake up and you realize there's no one following you. All right. And so I say all that just because it's a good to give ourselves an idea of like maybe where we are. But I want you all to rattle off to me qualities that you believe a good leader should have. I'm going to jot them down because in a little while I'm going to give you my definition. But rattle off qualities of what you think a good leader should have. Okay. Got it. Oops. Gal. Okay. All right. Just leaders in general. Can be anything. Trustworthy. Organized. Visionary. So we got boundaries, consistency, goal driven, trustworthy, organized, visionary, prayer, person of prayer, confident, role model. I'm sorry. Okay. So they have to be a good steward. We'll say um, does not reward nepotism. We'll say it that way, Lois. Hmm? Delegation. What did you say, Michelle? All right. All right. So we have a decent list. They know their boundaries. They're consistent, goal-driven, trustworthy, organized, visionaries, delegation. People of delegation overcomes obstacles. They're a person of prayer. They're confident. They have a role model. They value of resources. They're a good steward and does not reward nepotism. All right. Just keep that in your back pocket. We'll get there. All right? Don't you all look at me so crazy. All right. So, we're going to begin tonight by, I want to share some of this with you, and this may be some noteworthy stuff. I don't have a handout for it, but I want to talk a little bit as we start. I've been all over the place of where to start because there's 1,000 places we could start when we talk about leadership. But one of the things that I think most people struggle with the most when it comes to leadership is change. Most people struggle with change in general. Change in marriage, change in a job, change in our routines. When we go to turn the clocks back, we struggle with change. And so if we struggle with change in general and then to have change as a leader, it can be devastating. And so I want to make a few points about that, and then we're going to get into what I believe is some of the requirements to become a leader, essentials, so to speak. All right? And we'll get to that in a few minutes. So let's begin with change. It's a good thing? All right. Let's start there. So if we have to first understand there's always going to be change. Always, always, always. And if we don't plan on change, this is important. If you and I don't plan on change, that will determine in and of itself whether we're successful or not. If you and I don't plan for change, that in itself determines whether we're successful or not. Think about it this way. How many times things in life happen, catches us by surprise, and we didn't plan for it, right? Sometimes that's happened financially. We didn't plan for some major expense, and it happened, and we had no answer. It took some time to figure it out, perhaps. And so as a leader, we have to be okay with change, and we have to plan for that change. Because without it, we end up failing. All right? Consider that. You look confused, Mother. All right. I'm going to make some statements before I start really diving in and explaining some things. It's really important that you and I learn as much from our successes as we do our failures. All right. Most of the time we try to just learn from successes and we learn what works. But if we never really take the time to consider what we can learn from a failure, then you won't stay in a place of success long either. All right. Most of our life is full of ups and downs and all of those things, but we don't stay necessarily one place or the other very long. And so I really believe one of the hardest things is to step into leadership in any area, in an area or any area that you didn't grow into or you didn't groom. All right? If you didn't grow into it or you didn't groom. Because if you didn't grow into it or you didn't groom it, then you don't know where the issues is. The issues are, excuse me. The issues is, all right? Think about that. If it's not something that you have experience in or something that you've created or something that you've done, then you have no idea to know where the issues lie within it. It would be like me just randomly calling up somebody and saying, hey, I need you to come and run the food distribution. It'd be a challenge for them. It's not impossible for someone else to do it, but it'd be a challenge because they don't understand where the challenges are going to lie, right? And so that comes with any area. Now, the first point I want to make in regards to change, and to be a leader of change, it's really important that you and I are intellectual, number one. Now, anytime you've ever gone on a job interview, or if you've ever had to interview someone for a job, I've had to do that, been the interviewee, the first thing that you look at on a job application or a resume is their education, right? If we're looking for somebody to do something in the church or in any area, right? One of the first things we look at is their education, what experience they have, where did they go to school, how many people did they manage, whatever, right? And while it's important, I don't think it's the most important. All right. Because I find a lot of people who have education don't have these other three qualities that I'm going to give you that I think are imperative. Because it's easier for me to teach people what they don't know than to try to give them a quality that they do not possess. Does that make sense? And so if you don't know something, I can teach you what you don't know. But it is really challenging for me to try to develop a quality in you that you do not absolutely possess. So, of course, education's important. 2 Timothy 2:15 says that we are to study to show ourselves approved. So education is important, especially when it comes to church leadership or leadership in general. But so I do believe we need to be educated and all those things, but I do not believe it is the most important. I do, however, believe that we also need to know, number 2, about a person's emotional maturity. Emotional maturity. Now, that may seem strange, but I make this number 2 for a number of reasons. When I say emotional maturity, what I mean is how much stress and pressure can you handle? All right? There's a lot of people who are educated, but they're not emotionally mature. They can't handle pressure or stress. They know a lot of book knowledge, perhaps, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But they don't have the ability to see their way clear of a problem, right? They don't carry the emotional support, the emotional maturity that they need. So we often don't know how they'll react under pressure until they're already in a position, right? Sometimes we don't know how people react until we're working with them. We think a lot of people are great, right? We'll beat them on a job or meet them in church, and we think, oh, they're really great. And then we start working with them. And then we realize how they respond to pressure. And it will cause us to see a different person, right? I touched on that a little bit on Sunday, how sometimes there's more than just us, right? Jesus has neighbors, right? Within us. He lives in my heart, but he has neighbors, and other people will show up. And there's a lack of a emotional maturity in us if we're not able to handle certain types of pressure and crisis and manage it well. All right. So, for example, this year, a few weeks ago, I went to Kennywood. All right. And when I went to Kennywood, I thought it'd be like every other year. I like the biggest, the fastest, the highest. Always. Nothing wrong with it. Always had a blast. I didn't strap myself. I got in what's called the Sky Coaster. After riding some other stuff, got in there, and immediately when I hit the seat, I was on the very back of the train, and they pulled the shoulder rest down over me, and I started having a panic attack. And I told the young kid, I'm like, look, you got to let me out, man. He's like, nope, we're out of time. We got to go. And I'm like, oh, my God. I'm literally trying to pull the thing off. I needed out. I was having a panic attack because it was in that moment where my emotions were getting the best of me in a situation that I normally was fine with. Are you hearing me? And so I get on the Sky Coaster. Normally I was fine with something like that. It goes from 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds and goes straight up a hill really, really fast and then drops you immediately back down and all over the place. And I was always fine with it until this year. And I screamed like a little 6-year-old girl, curled myself down to the side of it, and when they took the pictures of it, I was like this, buried as far as I could down, trying to hide my head. I was petrified, right? I was petrified. Guess what? I wasn't scared of going up. I was scared of the drop. I was scared of what came after going up. That's the point. Yeah, I'll say. That's the point. They freak me out. I can see them through the window. So that's the point of when I'm talking about emotional maturity, is that sometimes our emotions, we're okay rising to success, but what do you do when the bottom falls out? What do you do when your plan doesn't work? What do you do when no help shows up? What do you do when there's no money in the bank? What do you do when those things that you counted as stability isn't there anymore, right? And so it's not going up that is the issue, it's the going down that is the problem. And so that's what we have to consider as leaders. It's not about the rise to success, it's about the fall. What do you do when the bottom drops out, all right? And so we have to look at people, we have to look at ourselves and really try to gauge, do we have the emotional maturity to go through the highs and lows? when we are working with people and we're choosing people to be a part of our team and working with us, we have to choose based on, do they have the emotional maturity to go through not just the successes, but the lows. There's a lot of people that can handle when things are going good. It's evident in church. When things are going good in people's lives, they're in church. You would think that it would be the opposite, that when things are going bad, they'll show up. Often it's the opposite. And the reason it's the opposite for them is they do not possess the emotional maturity to ever be used in leadership. That's one of the things we have to look at in our life. We have to take the time to spend and get to know people, because until you do, you'll start being friends and hanging out with and giving responsibilities to people that, guess what? They're going to let you down, because as soon as crisis hits, they bail. They don't know how to manage, engage, and bring stability into their life when the bottom falls out, all right? And so it's really important for all of us, whether we're a leader or we're going to become a leader or we're going to lead any certain amount of people. I don't care if we lead one person or we lead a team of 15, whatever it is. We need to look at those, not just ourselves, but look at those around us. Do they have the emotional maturity to go through the highs and lows with me? Because one of the things I know is I can be emotional. And so I need people that can go through the lows with me so that I can stay balanced. Right? And if you recognize that as your weakness, an area of weakness for you, then you definitely need to have people around you that can help stabilize you if you struggle in that way. All right? Make sense? All right. Because we learn from the lows. We learn from we learn how to sort of ride the highs to be able to endure the lows. And so we have to be able to, in essence, when I say emotionally mature, we have to be able to maintain our cool. Meaning we're not going to lose it. We're not going to flip out and totally have a meltdown, right? Sometimes we will have one, but have it privately, all right? I'm not saying being fake, but as we get into the leadership, you have to understand that people need to be able to trust in what and who they're following. And if they see us having a meltdown, it makes them question our abilities. Does that make sense? Have a meltdown privately, right? Don't have it in front of the whole church, or don't have it in front of your whole team, or right in the middle of the office. Don't do that, because it immediately puts everyone into question who's following you or looking to you for leadership. Let me put it to you this way. If you've ever flown, and then they come across, the pilot comes across and says, hey, we're experiencing a little bit of turbulence, right? Now, if the pilot says that and we're just experiencing a little bit of turbulence, we're just going to ask everyone to take their seats and fasten your seatbelts. We'll get through it in a few minutes. You feel safe, right? But if the flight attendant comes out of the cockpit like this and her eyes are big and she's holding on to everything and whispering to her other colleagues, you are ready to jump with or without a parachute. You're thinking, I'm going to find my way out of here, right? Because the moment that you see fear, you become frightened. Right? It's really important that as people in leadership, we don't demonstrate fear, but we demonstrate calm. Right? We have to always be. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter how serious it is. We just got to be calm and concise. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it's really important that in I'll get to it. If I jump ahead, I'll even confuse myself. So let me just say we have to have the emotional maturity. Make sense? All right. Because intelligence is not the only important quality. People have to have an emotional maturity to lead and lead well. All right. So if they freak under pressure, no. If they yell at the other staff, no. If they fall apart under pressure, no. You need to be able to have people that have an emotional maturity. The third thing is adaptability. I'm moving quick because this isn't the meat of what I want to share tonight. Adaptability. What I mean by that is you and I, we have to first ask ourselves, are we adaptable, right? In other words, how do we handle change? Remember I said this is all about change right here. So in order for you and I to handle change, we have to be adaptable. Some of us are just set in our ways, all right? You can't be set in your ways and if you're trying to lead people, because then you always want them to follow you the way you want them to follow you. All right, someone mentioned earlier about We have certain expectations of people. And if you and I aren't careful, we'll have we will have expectations of people that we did not communicate, and then we're the ones that always end up disappointed. There's nothing more detrimental to a leader than to be a leader that's disappointed. All right? Because if you and I are operating within disappointment, then it means that we are no longer able to see the future realized. Right? Same thing in a marriage. Same thing in any relationship. If you expect someone to respond a certain way, if you give someone a gift and they don't respond the way you want, you're disappointed. They didn't like, oh my, this is awesome, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you thought maybe they should have. You don't know what's going on in their head or what they're dealing with or whatever else is going on. You had an expectation that was not met, therefore who's disappointed? You are. Right? In the marriage of any kind, in any relationship, when people don't respond the way we expected them, we get disappointed. And yet as a leader, you and I have to be able to we have to have the adaptability, because without the adaptability, we'll always end up disappointed. Think of it like this. Jesus was a perfect example, of course, of adaptability. He had the ability to speak to a small group of 12 disciples, teach them, and raise them up, but yet he also had the ability to speak to a crowd of 5,000. He knew how to be personal, one-on-one when he needed to minister and bring forth a miracle, but he also knew how to minister to the masses. There's a lot of people, they know how to deal with someone one-on-one, but they don't know how to deal with a crowd. We have to be adaptable, right? So that if 4 people of the 10 that are supposed to be in the class are here, or there's 10 are in the class, we have to be adaptable and be able to do what we've got to do, all right? So whether we're leading a small group or a CEO or whatever it is that we're doing, we have to be able to be adaptable, all right? Think about it this way, when I'm talking about being adaptable. When we get married, all right? I use marriage a lot because it will always play hand in hand. When we get married, and people are standing up in the front of the church, I'll begin to ask the bride and groom questions right in the middle of the ceremony, right? And that's what we do, all right? We begin to ask questions, and really, the questions that we ask, that any of us ask in a wedding ceremony, should really come across as a warning. But we don't. Everyone's like focused on the dress she's wearing and the suit he's wearing and how nice they look and whether they're really smiling and how in love they are. But really, that is a moment of all seriousness when I say, or whomever is officiating says, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, to love and to cherish, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. And right away, everyone's so quick to say, I do. Not even considering what I just asked. They didn't consider it. They didn't consider it even in premarital counseling. It'd be fun. And then a year or two goes by, and one of them loses the job, and they got to declare bankruptcy, and the repo man comes and gets the car, and now the money that was in the bank is gone. Right? The wife gets sick and is out of work, right? Diagnosed with some terminal illness, but you said, without ever seeing what I ask you, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, for sickness and health, right? All of those things. Without ever considering or seeing, you said I do. Right? But yet our divorce rate is so high, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes because we never took the time to consider what we did not see. In other words, we never took the time to get to know a person's adaptability. We never took the time to see how they're really going to react under pressure. Because what is all of that? It's pressure. The reason it's part of your vows is so that we don't just up and quit and run out on the marriage at every little turn and creek, right? Every time someone gives us a bad attitude, we just don't say, that's it, I'm leaving, right? The reason they're in our vows is to get us to consider worst case scenarios, right? And yet we'll make a vow that I do without ever even considering them, right? We'll say I do without ever even seeing. Does that make sense? We'll say, I do until someone gets sick. We'll say, I do until we lose all the money, right? We'll say, I do until we see how that person really reacts under pressure, right? Because you can be married 5, 10 years before you ever really see who the real person is. Sometimes. Until something goes really bad and really wrong, right? So my point is that we often make an agreement on something before we've been exposed to the growth of the relationship that we'll end up encountering, all right? And so in other words, the point is get to know a person before you say I do. Get to know a person and their adaptability in leadership before you bring them in to be a part of our team and bring them in to be a pivotal part of something that takes a lot of responsibility. Get to know them and just see how they react under pressure first. How many of you know there have been some times in our life, we've had it in this church, where that was a bad decision. Put somebody, give them responsibility, and then you find out they cannot handle pressure. They have some skills. They maybe have the emotional maturity, right? They may have even a little education, but they have no adaptability. They can't change on a whim. They don't have the ability to see their way clear without being guided with every step, right? I don't have time to lead people for every step. If you can't figure your way out of a wet paper bag, then don't ask me to help you. I don't have time for that. Are you hearing what I'm saying? We have to be adaptable. Am I making sense? All right. All right. The reason adaptability I made it number 3 is if you're not you have to be adaptable to be able to handle success. If we're not adaptable, then we won't be able to, not only can we handle failure, but we wouldn't be able to handle success either. Because somebody had said to me once, and I can't think of the exact conversation, but someone said to me once that success can be as daunting as failure, right? Because once we've made it, we have to hang on to what we've made, right? Once we get a promotion at work, we have to be able to hang on to it. And sometimes hanging on to it is harder than reaching towards it, because now we've got it. Now we have to hold on to it. Sometimes holding on to a successful marriage is harder than working on a marriage to become successful, right? Y'all are looking at me like I'm crazy. All right. Along with number 3, that's where we're at, right? Adaptability, yeah. Let me put it this way. The reason adaptability, the reason emotional maturity, the reason education or being intellectual is important is often as leaders we'll have more opportunities than we have the infrastructure to handle it. All right. What do I mean? A blessing isn't a blessing if you can't handle it. All right. A blessing isn't a blessing if you can't handle it. In other words, if we don't have the proper infrastructure around us and underneath us with leaders, we can start something and struggle to finish it because we don't have the right people on our team. Does that make sense? And so there have been many times, watch this, there have been many times our church has been blessed with things, tractors, buildings, whatever. And everyone's like, oh, it's such a blessing. Right? It's easy to say it's a blessing. But listen to what I just said. A blessing isn't a blessing if you can't handle it. It'll make you really consider some things. If you can't handle it. Meaning not one person, but many. Right? If it's something that the entire church can't handle, not one person, then it's not a blessing. Right? We often look at things that come out of the blue or what we perceive to be an answer. But watch this. We often pray for things that we're not ready to manage or we can't handle. People will pray. You'll make jokes. Is that a $10 million check? Well, can you manage a $10 million check? Think of it that way, right? Women and men will be like, I'll pray for a spouse for me. Really? You mean you can manage one? 4 marriages later, right? You've learned from all those mistakes. You're ready to manage. I'm not being judgmental. I'm just trying to get us to think. A lot of times things that we see as a blessing, people will come, and we see them sometimes as a blessing or an answer, right? But a blessing isn't a blessing if you can't handle it. People aren't a blessing if you can't handle it and manage them, right? We will always encounter difficult people. One of the topics we're going to deal with through these weeks is dealing with difficult and challenging people, dealing with narcissistic people, right? Dealing with people that are just miserable or negative, right? How do you do that? Because somebody brought that topic up to me, so I thought, oh, we'll go there. And so you have to understand if they are unable to be a blessing to you or this ministry or your life if you yourself can't figure out how to manage them. Does that make sense? Because in every person who's created by God, there is a blessing. The only reason they came is because they have something to give. Your job as a leader is to figure out how to get them to deliver it. Make sense? So we have to be able to be adaptable, all right? Let me use this as an example. Over the years, and what we've been in existence as a church for 10 years, and over the years, I've always sort of been a person of protocol. Someone used to hate the word protocol, all right? Because what they heard is accountability. Right? Because protocol will keep you accountable. Right? And so I've always sort of been a person of protocol. And the reason is over the years, and I'll say this, years ago, not everybody in leadership liked to follow protocol, or in other words, the way to do things, right? And so we often had leaders that got upset all the time, right? Or they got upset with me, or they got upset when someone would say, well, you need to do this because that's not protocol, right? And there was a reason for it. And most of them just thought, oh, preacher and secretaries being difficult. Nope, wasn't that at all. There's a bigger reason for it, right? They just didn't want to work within the parameters that we gave, but the purpose of having protocol, the purpose for why we do certain things the way we do it, the reason why there's a protocol on how the offering is handled once the service is over and where it goes and who goes with it and no one ever alone with it. And the reason why there's no purses in the same area as the offering is a protocol to protect them, me, and everyone else, right? The reason there's a protocol, how someone sets up an appointment with me, there's a reason. Not everybody's aware of the protocol. The reason there's protocol for the altar service and who's helping and when and who's catching and who's covering up and all those things. The reason there's a protocol, how the camera's operated and the timing of it all and all of those things. There's a protocol behind everything, right? And the reason for it wasn't just for us to be difficult or any one person to be difficult. The reason for it was to have the infrastructure. This is what I was alluding to earlier. The reason for it was to have the infrastructure in place to handle growth as it comes. It's one thing to count the offering right now, right? Maybe you get, I don't want to say too much, but maybe you get $1,300, $1,400, $1,500, right? Cash in an offering on a Sunday, right? It's one thing to count that, get whatever's online, record that, right? It's another thing. Some people are like, I can't believe you make us count the money this way. Well, the reason is what are you going to do when it's 10? If you don't have a protocol in place, it'll be absolute confusion on what should take you 10 minutes to count $10,000. Really. It's going to take you an hour and 10 minutes because you didn't have a protocol in place, right? The same thing with anything about meetings or whatever it could be, whatever area protocol. The reason that you put protocols in place for people is so that they can be adaptable, right? That number 3, adaptable to be able to have the infrastructure to handle growth as it comes. It's not that anyone's being grumpy. It's not that anyone's being trivial, right? It's so that we can have the infrastructure. All of Washington is talking about infrastructure plan right now, right? And the reason it's so important is infrastructure is what gets you and I from A to B. If we don't have the right infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports in place in the country, we can't get to where we need to go, right? And so the same thing is true as a leader. You and I have to have the contingency plans sort of in place so that when something comes that we have the adaptability to change if we need to, right? When the road closure happened up there on 40, Pastor Daunting always travels that road to get here. He couldn't come the same way. He had to be adaptable and go around it. It added to his trip, but he had to be adaptable. You and I have to be adaptable as leaders. Now, let me move on because I'm taking too much time. The fourth one, the last one I'll cover on this little section, is sustainability. So we did adaptability, now sustainability. And I use sustainability as the final one for this section because we need the sustainability to sustain the successes once we get there. Let me give you this example. I'll put it this way. How many have ever noticed that you can drive down the road in your car, you can go by a certain house who has a dog, and the dog always chases the car? Right? Y'all falling asleep on me. Right? Dog always chases the car. Why? Why does the dog chase the car? Because he hates cars. Right? I wonder, did the dog ever consider that he cannot drive the car? That's a serious question. The dog never considered that it can't drive the car. Often we are like the dog chasing the car. Often we are chasing after things that we cannot run, that we cannot drive. I have seen it so many times in churches. Everyone wants to get to that point. They want to do this in ministry. They want to be this in leadership, right? But they do not have the ability to drive it once they get it. In other words, I could throw out titles tonight. Right? Could just throw them up here and tell you all, you're going to, whoever gets to whichever one is up here first, come get it. And you can get whatever title is in the envelope, right? But can you run it when you get it? Making sense? We often are chasing after things that we don't have the ability, the adaptability, the emotional maturity, right? The education, the exposure, whatever it may be, to be able to run it, all right? And so we got to have the commitment to stability in the midst of all kinds of fluctuations. That makes people comfortable. If I'm committed to stability and keeping things stable, that'll help people feel more comfortable even though things are a little dicey, right? If we're committed to seeing it through, if we're committed to doing whatever has to happen. When I say sustainability, let me make this point and then I'll... this is what I was alluding to earlier. What do you do with bad news? Right? It's important that we have the sustainability even to handle bad news, all right? I can't help but think, and I don't mean this to be critical, so forgive me, but I can't help but think through the last couple of weeks, all we've heard on the news is about Afghanistan. And regardless of how it was done, right, whether you agree or disagree, everyone can agree that the messaging of it was terrible. How do I know that? Because you know that the messaging's terrible when the White House had to keep coming out and making statements to correct something from before. When someone else would have a press conference and then they had to come out and correct what they said that was wrong. And there was all this confusion going on, right? There was nothing clear about it. There was nothing sustainable about what they were doing, right? There was a real communications problem. So you and I, in order to be sustainable, we have to also know how to deliver bad news, because sometimes as a leader we have to say, I had to say a few weeks ago, hey, we're going to have to cancel the next X number of work days, and here's why, right? I had to deliver bad news, but the key is when you and I have to deliver bad news as a leader to a small team, to one person, to just the people in the office or whatever, we have to deliver a clear, concise, accurate message. What do I mean? If you've ever had to call your car payment or your cell phone company and say, hey, my name's Adam Lawson, and I can't pay my bill this month. Right? You just blurt it out. You don't, right? You don't come up with excuses, say, well, I might be able to. I'm not sure. If you hem-hawing around, I need people that can say what needs to be said. Spit it out, right? Be clear and concise. Because if you're not sustainable. Am I making sense? And if you're not sustainable, now you're of no value. That's a big statement, but it's huge. I don't have time as a leader to sit and try to help you think out your own thoughts. Right? As a leader, you should already know where you're going so that when trouble comes, you're adaptable enough that you know the workaround on how to still get where we need to go because we're going to be sustainable. Am I being clear? That's how you know there's a breakdown in leadership in the White House, when it's happening from the podium. Right there. When it's happening from the podium, that's how you know any president is failing as a leader, because he or she doesn't know what they're communicating. It's not their fault. They're just the mouthpiece. Right? Good way of looking at it. Anyway. So a clear, concise, accurate message always creates a clear expectation. This goes back to something that Rick said earlier. A clear, concise, accurate message always creates a clear expectation, which will avoid disappointment. When I said a few weeks ago, we are going to cancel the next bump work days, and the next work day won't be till September, the end of September, I was trying to be clear and concise in stating why. There's a lack of volunteers. And 2, the community that's so supportive fell off the cliff. So I was letting the need be known, right? But I was being clear and concise as to not allow people to be disappointed with the outcome, the anticipated outcome, all right? Because I've learned that people can handle bad news if they can trust your message. We have, as a nation, have handled bad news when the president comes on at 8 or 9 at night, right? When 9/11 happened, now that we're celebrating the 20th anniversary, and that happened that day, we were able to digest the bad news when President Bush came out, even in an elementary school, and delivered the news. We are under an apparent terrorist attack, but it was because he came out calm. He didn't come out, think about everything I'm telling you and how you can start putting it together. He didn't come out gripping the podium, shaking and trembling. He didn't do that. He came out with a clear, concise, accurate message. And as a nation, we digested the bad news. And within hours, we were ready to, as a nation, we were like, we're going to kill him. We're going to go after him. We were behind then whatever he said. We knew at 9 p.m. when he delivered his another speech from the White House. I'm aware of all these events because that's all I've been watching over the last 2 weeks on the History Channel, is the reliving the events. When he came on at 9 o'clock that night and delivered his speech, and then the next day when he goes to, stands on the pile of rubble and tells, I can hear you, right? The whole world can hear you, and soon the people who knock down these buildings are going to hear all of us, right? We were all like at home shouting to the TV, right? Because he was giving a clear, accurate, concise message. Yet he was delivering bad news, letting us know what was going on in the world, right? You and I sometimes have to deliver bad news. I'm not afraid to tell someone you're doing a terrible job, right? If I have to call mom in the office and say, look, you're just not doing a good job, mom. Right? Let's say she's not typing fast enough, Rick, all right? Watch this. This is where most leaders go wrong. You don't know how to deliver bad news. First of all, I always begin with bad news by saying, I wanted to first thank you for all your hard work and the long hours that you put in, and I want you to know how much we really appreciate it. Boom, positive. Then slam them with the negative. I really do want to talk to you today, though, about something serious, Mom. I have a problem with the amount of work that you get done. This is just a hypothetical. Relax, y'all. Really do have a problem with the amount of work that you get done in a day. I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with how fast you type. Most people would say something like, you're all looking at me like, oh, my God, he's totally telling his mom she can't type fast enough. No, I'm not. It's a joke. It's just an example. Most people would say something like this. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you because you're just not getting enough done. and I want to know what the problem is. Immediately what you just did is let them know that they are the problem. That is terrible leadership. Because immediately you're going to get blowback. And immediately they're going to react on the offensive, or the defensive, and they're going to attack you. Well, you keep throwing all this stuff on my desk, and I don't ever know which is to do first, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and you're going to hear it. You need to be able to give a clear, concise, and accurate message and let people know, hey, my problem isn't with you. My problem is with how slow you're typing. My problem isn't with you. My problem is the fact that you're just not focused enough. Right? You're hearing what I'm saying. Same thing in a marriage or any relationship. My problem isn't with you. It's what you said to me that is the problem. It's how you reacted to how I said. You're hearing what I'm saying. This is why we have the blow-ups, and we're terrible at communication. And the reason we're so terrible at it in the church, and the reason I know that, is because I've seen the fallout. People have left the church not because of what I said, but what another leader said. Many times. Many times. Because they never took the time to learn how to communicate. Right? And the same people get mad in their text messages. Right? If you have people getting mad in your text message, then you don't know how to communicate. Right? If you can't send an email and say it accurately and concisely, then you don't know how to communicate. Am I being real or not? It's a fact, and we are terrible at it in the church, and the reason we are is because we're terrible communicators at home. We come to church and try to lead the same way we do at home, and it doesn't work. If we would perfect our leadership abilities and even our communication, we'd be better in the home and better in the church. Oh, that's true. I know it's true. Yes, it is. So let me summarize it this way. It's not what happens to you. It's how you handle what happens to you. We've all heard that saying. This is the whole point of everything, those 4 points. It's not what happens to you. It's how you handle what happens to you. That's the reason for all 4 of these, is to help you be able to handle what comes your way, right? It doesn't necessarily know that I'm going to know all the answers, but if I have a plan in place, if I have the infrastructure in place, then whatever crisis comes, I'll be able to figure it out, right? That's why you can't just be the only leader. This is why it is essential that we have leadership at the church, because if I'm the only one, when I go down, it all goes down. Churches without leadership is a one-man band, and it is destruction, one crisis away from happening. Think about it that way. Pastors, churches who refuse to have people helping are always one crisis away from utter destruction. That is not good. Business is the same way. Now, final point, I think, and then we're going to deal with essentials of a leader. How many of all have ever been stressed? I want to tell you what the purpose of stress is. This will help you, believe it or not. And it all goes right into what I'm telling you already. All 4 of these are going to tie us right to stress. Because we've talked about, help me now, being intellectual. We've talked about emotional maturity. We've talked about adaptability. And 4th, sustainability. Now, all 4 of those, if they are working in your life appropriately, you should be able to live your life with a managed amount of stress. All right? And here's why. Because stress is an indicator that you have to change structure or strategy. All right? If you and I are losing sleep, if Lois goes home and loses sleep over church finances, you know what that says to me? What I just said. That you have to change your structure or your strategy. If I go home, and there used to be many times I would lose sleep over what was going on in people's lives or whatever. I don't do that no more. I don't lose sleep over nobody. I had a major issue I was dealing with a few weeks ago, and believe it or not, the only reason I wasn't sleeping was because I was busy doing what I couldn't get done because I was dealing with the problem. I wasn't up worrying about them or the situation or anything else. No. Right? because I knew I had the structure and I knew I had the strategy to handle it. I can't worry whether they did. Right? Stress in your life is an indicator that you have to change. We often do this. We often misplace our stress on someone else. We will blame our stress on our spouse, a neighbor, a coworker, the preacher, the leaders. No, your stress is your problem. And I'm going to explain it to you. Are you all disagreeing with me? You can tell me if you don't, because I'll explain my way out of it. I promise. Because here's the point of what I'm trying to let you know. Stress is letting you know that you don't have the structure or the strategy to handle where you're at in life. The reason we stress over finances, let's be real. If you've ever lost sleep over money, and we all have, right? It's because we don't have the structure or the strategy in place, meaning I don't have a backup plan, and I don't see any money coming down the pike. So I'm losing sleep, right? We don't have any structure or strategy for where we're at in our life, right? The reason that they go around inspecting bridges, right? They'll put the crane down over and they'll lower it, and they're looking for fractures, right? They're looking for stress cracks. Because the bridge was designed and built to handle a certain amount of weight and stress. Sometimes, how many know that over the years we've seen some bridges collapse? Those engineers made some catastrophic mistakes and didn't account for the weight, didn't account for the age of it, didn't account for certain factors, right? And the bridge will suddenly collapse. Think about that the next time y'all drive over one. Hallelujah, right? Every time I cross the Bay Bridge, or when you go down to the bayou in Louisiana, I thought about that. I was traveling from Texas, seeing my kids, to Pensacola, Florida, for a little vacation, and then I ministered at Brownsville Assembly of God. And so it was sort of like a whatever. And for like 3.5 hours, I'm on bridges. They're just connected one to the other, and miles and hundreds of miles of just bridge. And I'm thinking, not only is there alligators in here, but it stinks, it's sewage, and God, if one of these bridges collapse, you know. I hope they knew what they were doing when they built them, right? They inspect the bridges to see if there's any stress cracks as an indication that it cannot hold the weight. You and I need to be able to identify if we are stressing out in life, it's because you are struggling to handle the weight in life. You don't have the structure, and you don't have the strategy to handle where you are. You got to change something. You have to do it, all right? Because, especially we can focus on churches, but everything that I'll teach you won't just be good for church. It'll be good for work or wherever, anywhere in life. But we often, in the church, we have to work with limited people, limited resources, right? Limited money, limited everything. We often have to do a lot with very little. This is true. I mean, it's true of most things. Even a lot of businesses, you got to do a lot. Bosses will come to you and say, I need you to do this, but I only can let you spend X dollars, right? You and I have got to be able to look at the people around us and under us. Watch this. We have to look at the people that are around us and under us and see if they have the structure to handle the weight of winning. Because that's what it comes down to. There is weight in winning. Right? There were some issues the day of the Dream Center press conference, right? Found out after the fact. I didn't know it. I didn't know it the day of. I didn't know it 2 weeks later. Some people were among themselves. You know why? They cannot handle the weight of winning. And we just got started. So in my mind, immediately I just made a little note. Just keep that in mind. So that when it all comes together and they want a seat at the table, don't give them one. Because the same way they were whispering in the corner there when you started, they'll be whispering in the corner against you. Are you hearing me? Because they can't handle the weight of winning. All right? Now, let me put it this way when it comes to stress, because I don't want to just give up on what I'm trying to get to you. How many know that sometimes we'll go home at the end of the night and you'll hit the bed and you're like, what a whirlwind of a day. Stressed, right? Just exhausted because we were on the go, 1,000 things going on, right? A whirlwind, chaotic. But if you and I, as leaders, only focus on the whirlwind in our lives, we don't have time to grow. All right. The whirlwind, believe it or not, when we feel that way, the whirlwind of life is important. As a leader, you have to keep moving. You shouldn't have downtime if you're leading people, like a lot of it, right? But the whirlwind is important. But I made a statement one time about the most important thing, the most interesting, the most important feature of a football game. Anybody remember when I said that? I did it in a message once. Y'all never listened to me, that's why. The most important feature of a football game, what do you think it might be? Halftime show, okay, that's your thought, okay. Most important feature, Lois, about football. Making a half-court shot? Okay, unity of the team. All right, Mom, what's the most important thing? All right, the score. What do you think? The game plan. You're all wrong. You're all wrong. The most important feature of the football game is the clock. What makes the game exciting isn't the team, it's not the togetherness, it's the clock. Am I not right? The reason Mom pees herself the last 15 minutes of a game is because the clock's running. The last 2 minutes, you can't even stand to have her on the phone. She will scream your ear off. Why? What makes it interesting? The clock. Right? Because what we're doing at home, we're watching the clock and we're knowing time is running out. The players on the field know the time is running out. They're watching the play clock, right? They're watching the minutes wind down. They're realizing their time's running out, right? So the most important feature of a football game and what makes it exciting is the clock. That is the same feature that needs to be a part of our everyday lives, especially as a leader. You need to put a clock on things. Most of us are never effective as a leader because you don't put a clock on anything. You just endure the whirlwind. Am I making sense? If you were to look in my planner, and I wouldn't let you anyways because it's my business and not yours, but if you were to look at my planner, what you will see is everything is sketched out. When I get up in the morning, I know what I'm doing that day because my day is planned out in 15-minute intervals. Now, some tasks obviously take longer than 15 minutes. I have to fix one of Lois's mistakes. That'll take 3 hours. But if I have to, if I have phone calls to make, I'll put, phone calls, or I'll put conference call or whatever on there. But I know what I'm doing from the moment that I schedule myself to be in the office till I leave. If it's a day I'm not in the office, I know, hey, at 10 o'clock I'm going to pay bills. At 10:30 I'm going to pray for money. At, whatever it may be. At this time I'm going to do this. Why? Because I understand that it makes what I'm doing more exciting if you put a clock on it. I know that at the end of the day, when I'm done with my whirlwind, I feel accomplished and not like the day got me, but I got the day. Right? Because it's the most exciting feature of the game. And we have got to put a clock on things. Let me put it to you this way. We got a lot going at the Dream Center that needs to be accomplished, and I've been nice and I've been kind, but now I'm going to put a clock on it. I'm going to ask for a certain amount of money by a certain date from this church, and then I'm going to do the same for the community. I'm going to put a clock on it. And it be, if this isn't raised by this time, right, then we're going to look at other alternatives, right? I'm going to communicate clear and concise, right? I'm going to let people understand the need, right? But if I put a clock on it, it creates an excitement, right? It was easy to get the money for the bathroom, right? It was easy. And everybody was behind it because everybody doesn't want to have to walk up and down stairs. It's a whole lot harder to get people to give to something that they don't have the ability to see, or that they don't have the ability or any use for. Right? And so what do? You put a clock on it. Right? You make it exciting, right? You put the pressure on. You put the pressure on everyone that's working alongside of you. Why should I be the only one carrying the pressure? Right? Everyone who's invested or a part of the vision should carry the responsibility of the clock. So that's what I'm going to do. Share the clock with the team. Are you hearing me? That's a good way of putting it. It's a good way to help us understand it. In other words, by putting a clock on it, how many of you know every one of us should have goals in life? And yet one of the things we end up doing is we have goals in our mind that never become realized because we end up saying, I didn't have the time. I have the ability almost every week to work on goals in the middle of counseling, phone conferences with the food bank, usually every late afternoon, twice a week, all of those things, whether it's praying with people on the phone, no matter everything that's going on, I always have time, believe it or not, whether it's in my office researching something, making a phone call about something, to work on goals. How do you do that when you have so much else going on? Because you're putting a clock on everything else. If you put a clock on everything else, you will always have time to work on your goals. Somebody once said something about the goals that we should refer to them as WIGs, wildly inspired goals, right? Wildly inspired goals. So you will always have time for your goals if you put a clock on the rest of your life. So that you make time for your goals. So you make time to look for what's ahead. All right? Making sense? So in other words, I can put a goal for the church is we're going to grow by X number by this certain time or this certain date, right? You put a clock on it, right? You set goals, right? You communicate them. And we're able to do that because we're putting a clock on everything else. All right? Make sense? All right. Questions about anything I've shared thus far? Are you confused, bored, ready to go home? Time has gotten away. My goodness, I spent longer on that than I wanted to. All right. Now, moving right along. I want to move into this next section because I think it's important. What? Yeah, I don't have a lot of time left. Whew. Good Lord. All right. Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about which one to do. All right. Let me do a little bit of this on becoming a leader. You can just, if you're titling things, you can do that. Becoming a leader. And we won't get through it, but I'll get started on it. This section that I want to focus on is about, it's helping, we could say it this way, it's how to cultivate, develop in the leadership power in you and others. Some of you have heard me do teaching before, maybe Michelle, you've heard that I'm a believer that trapped in every follower is a hidden leader. I have the belief that everyone is called to lead. Right? It's there. It's the job of the people who are leading to help them develop leadership. All right. There will be some people that will always just want to follow, but our goal should still be to help them pull the leader out in them. All right. And so that's why this section is about how to cultivate, develop the leadership power in you and others. And know that we all don't know it all. We all don't have it all figured out. But every time a challenge comes, you typically learn something more about leadership. Every time something goes right, you'll learn something about leadership. So I like to put it this way. All right. Everyone was born to lead, but you must become a leader. Everyone was born to lead. Remember in elementary school, the teacher, everyone would take a turn being the leader? Create a single file. It's Monday. It's Rick's turn to be the leader of the class, right? And they walk you down to the water fountain or to the potty, right? And the reason is out of that same mentality, is everyone is born to lead, but you must become a leader. And if you had certain behaviors through the week leading up to your turn being the leader, you would lose the privilege of being the leader, right? We have to not forget that principle that they began to teach us in elementary school. Well, I know you were in a one-room schoolhouse, Lois, so there was no trips down the hall to the potty. However, the rest of us, we grew up with long halls and water fountains and indoor toilets, not a little potty outhouse. And so everyone was born to lead, but you must become a leader. And so if you acted out, you lost the privilege to lead. We have to have that same mentality in the church, that everyone is born to lead, but you must become a leader. And if they're not demonstrating qualities of a leader, set them down, right? So let me put it to you another way. I've used the examples of trees, and I've used examples throughout leadership teaching of banana trees and mango trees and all kinds of stuff. How, you remember any of that? Do you? You actually do? Do you remember any of it? I'll be addressing a mango tree a lot in this series, believe it or not. They're beautiful, all right? They're powerful, and there's a lot to them that we'll address and utilize as sort of an example as we get through this, because I just refer to it a lot. So, thinking about that, every seed was created to become a tree, but it must become the tree. Right? Every seed, if you're going to be Johnny Appleseed, right? And you're going to take some seeds and you're going to go plant them, right? It's a seed. But what kind of seed is it? Mom, in an apple. Right. So every seed was created to become a tree, but it must become the tree. Always one in the group, you know. Yeah, of course. Listen to what I'm telling you. Every seed was created to become a tree. Right? If we plant any grass seed outside, every seed was created to become grass, but it has to become the grass. Right now it's a seed. Grass seed, apple seed, mango seed, doesn't matter. It's a seed, but it has the ability, the capability to become the tree. All right? In order for the tree to come out of the seed, the tree must submit to the process. Right? It has to submit to the process. You put that seed in the ground, you cover it up a little bit, you water it, you wait, you water it, you wait. There is a process. What you don't see that's happening under the ground is it's germinating and breaking down and all of that. There's a whole process going on under the soil. And that same kind of process is what you and I have to go through as a leader. All right? Inside of you is a leader that God created, but you and I have to submit to the process. This is one of the things that most people, especially in church, don't want to do. They want to lead, they want a title, but they don't want to endure the process. They don't. You tell them, hey, I need you to be an usher. Well, I want to be the head usher. No, you don't know how to be the head usher. Sit down and shut up. You know, or I want to be the praise and worship leader. No, we'll have you sing, but I don't want you leading the worship. You don't know what I want. We don't even know if you can sing. Right? I'm called to ministry. You have a desire to preach, but do you love people? No, I can't stand people. Sit down. Right? Hear what I'm saying? I have seen it over and over again. Over the history, over the 10 years that Fresh Fire has been in existence, do you know how many people have come through the door that's called to ministry? And you want to know how many of them are actually in ministry? Very few. Let me put it another way. There were a lot of people who stood with me until I went through my burnout. And when I went through burnout, the church split, and anybody who hadn't already left, the rest of them left. And when I came back, my church was 3/4 the size that it was before I left. And even the leaders who said, I'm with you, before I ever even had burnout, with you. We're just here because we need relationship, and we thank God for the relationship, and we thank God that we know you, and we understand. Watch this. And we know what God's called you for. We know the man that you are. And then guess what? When I didn't call and say, hey, I'm going through burnout and I'm crying like a psycho on the phone, literally broke down completely the day after Dr. Howe called me on the phone and said, you are preaching no more for a while. Went into the office briefly to set some things in order so that I could be gone for a while. Was crying, totally out of my mind, couldn't get my thoughts together. And because they didn't get a phone call from me, they left the church. And they were leaders, close-knit, and in ministry. Guess what? Right here. Inside of you is a leader that God created, but you must submit to the process. That was a moment where they should have submitted to the process and remembered and realized everything that they had been taught up to that point. And realize this is a moment where everything I've been taught, I need to rise to the occasion. I don't need a phone call because I don't need a pat on my back because that's not what being a leader is all about anyway. And if it is, then you're not called to lead, you are called to follow. Because followers need pats on the back. Leaders don't need that. I don't need you to tell me it was a good message. Right? It's nice once in a while, but I don't need that from anybody. Because if you get stuck on that, then you'll get used to that. And then when people don't say, oh, that was a good job, or you did really good, or then you feel inferior. Don't ever get addicted to people's compliments. And the only reason you need people's compliments is because you don't know who you are. If you need people to tell you did a good job, then you're not confident in who you are anyway. All right? Think about that. So I use that example of people leaving and things like that because it was more about them than it was me. I was the one that was in need. And when I was in my greatest place of need in a long, 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 long time, they left. You know why? Because my need wasn't as great as theirs in their eyes. That's true. So you are born a leader, but you are made into one through a process. You are born a leader, but you're made into one through a process. Let me say it another way. A title doesn't make you a leader. Oftentimes, I've been guilty that you often will give a title. You see some examples of people. You see some qualifications in people, and that you give them a title, and then immediately they think the learning has stopped. I've seen it so many times it's not even funny. So it's been a long time since I've given a title. Because most people interpret that as I've arrived. I don't need to hear anything else you have to say. That they already know it all. And so one of the greatest tests is then, for me, is what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm taking 4 weeks off. You got it. And I'd come back to probably the church half the size with a whole lot more problems. You know the reason, how many remember back years ago, when the church was early, I always took a couple weeks off a year. But every time I took time off, there were problems. Every time. Somebody was mad. Usually the leadership fought amongst themselves. Something, always. You know why? Huh? Because they stopped trying to learn. Simple as that. Instead of working down and saying, we're at this as a team, let's make sure nothing catastrophic happens like it did last year, it was always worse than the last year. Right? Because it got embedded on, this is my goal, this is my responsibility, this is mine. And anytime you put one person in charge, the rest of them attack them like a dog. Right? Let me put the example this way. People that come to church that aren't like us, what usually happens is the junkyard dogs of the church or any church will drive out the person who's different than them because that's just what they do. Think about that. Why do they get driven out? Well, because people say, oh, I just don't like them. Well, why don't you like? I don't know. I just don't like them. You're a junkyard dog. Right? There are some people, yeah, we will not get along with. But just because I don't get along with you, I actually can communicate and say, you know what? I don't know what it is, but I can't with you. I just don't like you very much. I'm not embarrassed to say that. It's not you, it's me, right? When you break up with someone, it's not you, it's me, right? It's not having nothing to do, it's me. I just don't like you. I don't know what it is about you, but I just can't click with you. You know, can we go to dinner? No, not really. I'm really not interested. Right? I remember I told you the story in church of went on a date once. This was a long time ago. And they sat there the whole time on their phone. And I got up and walked out. Right? Because if you don't understand the value that's sitting in front of you, don't expect me to, like, show it to you. You need to know it's all that and a bag of chips and a thing of squeezed butter and a glass of wine on the side. You know, if you don't see that, how did I put it there? Whatever you value, you make time for. Right? And so if I don't value you, I'm not going to make time for you. Makes sense? In the church, we have a problem trying to make time for people that we're not sure where their value is. But if they're there, they're valuable. Your job as a leader, remember, you're born a leader. Well, you have to go through the process. Part of your process is to figure out what's valuable in them. Right? They're going to rub you the wrong way. Fine, let them rub you the wrong way. That's how pearls are formed. Let them rub you the wrong way, but while they're rubbing you the wrong way, figure out what it is about them that's valuable. Right? We've all had good and bad relationships, but not everything about everyone is bad. I've served with some not so great preachers, and I've served with people that can preach but suck as a leader. Right? Let me give this example. It's not a secret. My dad could preach, but he sucked as a leader. Anything that was controversial or needed confronting, I got to deal with. That's when I got called into ministry and I got initiated. It was just like, okay, here you go. Hey, by the way, I need you to sit, Pam. I almost came out. I just need you to sit, submit, thank you, Jesus. This isn't going to go on TV. I need you to sit so-and-so down and tell her I don't want her to play no more. Or can you go deal with this person? I don't know what's going on downstairs, but can you make sure that these ladies will do this? I don't like the way that they're cleaning. Hey, can you go and deal with this? I heard that so-and-so is having an affair. Can you go take care? I mean, it was all the time. And then one night the phone rings. He's like, hey, so-and-so's chasing their son with a pitchfork through the yard. I need you to go because I'm just on my way home from work. Okay, yeah, sure. He could preach. He couldn't lead. He didn't know how to lead. He didn't know how to delegate. And when he did, it was more tyrannical than anything. I said, and that's what I want you to do. Whether you were the treasurer, an usher, when you ask why, because I said. He didn't know why, because he wasn't a leader. All right? Leaders can explain why. A real leader can handle criticism. A real leader can handle the fact, let me put it this way. I don't need everybody to agree with me all the time. But what I do need from you is the respect enough to believe that even, and the understanding that I will love you even though we disagree. And I'll stand with you and stand beside you even though we disagree. But can you do the same? Most people won't. Because when they disagree, people would say, oh, I don't believe we need building 1.9 billion. I'm leaving. Okay, bye. Most people, I hear throughout the church, at times when people have left, people get all hurt and wounded. Why? Blow them a kiss goodbye. Open the door and help them. Seriously. I don't mean that they're bad people. I'm saying you have to understand that if they're not willing to stand with you through hard times or good times or whatever it is, open the door. Same thing with friendships and everything else. because it's obvious they don't value what you value. And if they don't value what you value, you can't stand together. Right? Because the Bible says a house divided cannot stand, right? Trapped in every follower is a hidden leader, all right? Trapped in every follower is a hidden leader. Second point, every human was created to lead and designed for dominion. Watch this. Now, we'll talk more about dominion as we go through this, but every human was created to lead and designed for dominion. All right, now watch this. You are wired for dominion, but not over people. Most people think that leadership is about having dominion or authority over people, and it isn't. It has to do with leading people, but it doesn't mean we operate in authority over people. Does that make sense? In other words, it's not a what I say goes sort of world. Most people think in leadership, I'm large and in charge. You're large, but you're not in charge. Right? Because it's not about leading people in that way. It's not about having dominion. All right? It's not about that at all. In fact, as the Bible instructs us about leadership, it's not about dominion over people at all. In fact, Jesus rebukes, I can't get ahead of myself. Jesus rebukes some because they were taking dominion over people and not leading, and we'll get to that. Number 3, leadership potential resides in every individual. You might think that some of these are redundant. Believe it or not, they're not. They're each different. Leadership potential resides in every individual. Number 4, I already alluded to, but I'll give it to you anyway. You were born to lead, but you must become a leader. I gave that away right in the beginning. You were born to lead, but you must become a leader. That was number 4. Number 5, true leadership is self-manifestation. Now watch this. True leadership is self-manifestation. Again, I sort of started giving this away also. And I'm going through these quick. We will go over them individually more next time. So I said true leadership is self-manifestation. Again, is a mango seed a mango tree? Well, the mango seed, inside the seed is the tree. It just has to go through the process. Remember what I said earlier. Inside of you is a leader. You have to go through the process. Inside the seed is the tree. It just has to go through the process. So inside the seed is the mango tree. But in order for that seed to manifest, the tree must go through the process. So true leadership is self-manifestation. You have to go through the process. If the seed doesn't go through the process, it doesn't become the tree. If you don't go through the process, you don't become the leader. Now, number 6. The purpose for true leadership is the production of leaders. The whole purpose that we need leaders in our life is the production of other leaders. The whole purpose of leadership in our government is really to produce other leaders. In the church, the whole purpose to have leadership is to produce other leaders. So, if you are a true leader, you will find that you desire is to help others to be leaders and not just followers. If you're a real leader, you find a desire to help other people become leaders, not just follow. If you enjoy having followers, then you're a dictator, not a leader. There's a difference. Some leaders need followers and therefore stop you from progressing because they suffer from an inferiority complex. All right. A true leader has passion to make other people great. They're secure enough in their self that your greatness doesn't intimidate them. A true leader has passion to make other people great. I don't want to give it away early, but really, We should never be afraid that someone could take our job. Never. If we are a true leader, if you and I have a job, whether it's in the workplace or in church or whatever, and we're gripping that thing as tight as we can, desperately trying to hold on to it, you're not a true leader. Because a true leader would want, what did I just say? You have a passion to make other people great, and you're secure enough in yourself that your greatness, that their greatness doesn't intimidate you. So if they're better at it than you are, move out of the way and say, I am so glad you're here. Right? That's really important. A lot of times we are operating out of such insecurity. I have seen it in this church in 10 years operate at times tremendously. Someone can play an instrument better than another. If someone has the ability to count money better than the next. If someone has just better administrative skills than the next, right? If someone has the ability or knows something that someone else does, God forbid. Watch. If someone knows information that someone else doesn't, they feel like they're missing out. It's not your job to know. Yet we'll have a coronary, right? But I'm totally serious. A real leader isn't intimidated by those things, right? And so we need to applaud the fact when those people come into our life, when people come in that are better than us in an area, or people come in, or when people know things that we don't. What I've learned is if someone knows something that I don't, I thank you, Lord, I am not responsible for it. It's a misconception we have about leadership. We think being in leadership means that we need to know everything. No, you only need to know what is adequate to your life, to your part of leadership, right? Not everybody in leadership knows everything that's going on in the church. When I've been dealing with an issue over the last couple weeks, someone said to me, well, does so-and-so know? Does this one know? I said, no one knows but who I told you. And they said, are you sure? I said, I know so, because I didn't tell. And I said, if you believe and trust me, then trust what I'm telling you. Right? And so they were able to find comfort in the fact that no one else knew, because they trusted me, not to tell the world, right? You and I, as a leader, need to take comfort in knowing that we're not responsible for everything. I'm only responsible to know and manage what is under my little realm, my jurisdiction, right? I like to think of it this way, even if you are the main leader, even if you are, my job isn't to know everything. People like to often think that I need to know everything. No, I don't need to know every detail. If I need to know every detail, then I have no use for you. If I need to know that you did A, B, C, you took a bathroom break, and then you went to lunch, and then you came back and you did E, F, G, this person called and that, and you're telling me this, why? Because you want me to think you're busy? Right? Or whatever. Then there's no use for you, right? You need to just be okay with what you've got to know and be okay with what you don't got to know and be like, thank you, Jesus, walk away, right? It's not for me to know, right? It's not for me to figure out. It's not for me to, if it was for me to know, somebody would have told me, right? It's one of the biggest problems that when I worked at the bank is I was the only guy for a long time that worked on what we called the platform or the desks, the loan officers. And it was like one rooster with a bunch of hens all the time. And they were always fighting amongst themselves about what they didn't know. And for the longest time, the branch manager, she would call me in the office because I was like the Thursday night and weekend manager, so I did the weekend shifts because I was the newest promoted. And so she would call me in her office about problems or staff and say, hey, I need you to do this, this, and this, or hey, we need you to audit so-and-so over the weekend. And the tellers could never know when they were getting audited because, then they would put money back if they stole it. So you surprise audit them. And so she would tell me these things. Well, every time she would do that, and my desk was here, and another lady by the name of Barb was over here. Every time she what did Sue want? Is everything all right? She looked like she was pretty serious. I'm like, it's fine. What she needs you to do? I said, well, if I tell you, it's not a surprise anymore, is it? Well, why, who's in trouble? Do they suspect something? I said, it's not for you to know. That's the reason she called me to the office. Now, when she calls you to the office, that's for you to know, right? They couldn't stand it. Even the assistant branch manager, she was 2 desks away. She would call my phone. Hey, Adam, what's going on with Sue? Is she in a bad mood? Can I go in there? I'm like, yeah. What did she want with you? Yeah, all the time. Because if it was for them to know, she would have known. She was even the assistant branch manager and didn't know what we talked about because it wasn't her job to know, right? We got to get comfortable with what we don't know. Celebrate what you don't know. Be like, thank you, Jesus, I'm not accountable for that. Because God is only going to hold me accountable for what I know. The Bible says that. That when we stand before him, he's going to hold me accountable for what I know, not for what I don't know. So for everything that I take on that is not my responsibility, I get to be held accountable for that. So when you know something about someone and you didn't do anything about it, and yet you know they're going down the wrong path, and you just kept quiet because you just wanted to know the gossip, God's going to hold you accountable for that. And you didn't do anything to stop it. That's big. All right. Some nuggets about being a leader. We're going to pick up, and when we pick up next time, I'm going to start dealing with true leadership. I wanted to give you my definition to leadership, and I guess I'll do that next time, unless you want me to give it to you now, but I'll give it to you next time. All right. My definition will sound completely different than probably yours. All right. Completely different. Any questions or anything, and we'll stop there, I guess. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the main point of where we were, is that it's about having the structure in place so that whatever happens that you're not aware of that could. When something unexpected happens. I had something happen recently, and I told someone, I said, you cannot wait until a moment like this and then tell me what's happening. Because if someone comes to me and they wait to the last minute to make me aware of something that's time sensitive, you know, right. So I have to be able to have some structure and things in place to be able to deal with situations like that. So I think it's important. The point is that we would have the structure and the stability in place. But that goes along with how I said, put a clock on things. There's times where I will feel a little bit overwhelmed, but when I start feeling overwhelmed, I look at my schedule. I'm telling you, I still use an old school planner. I don't just use my phone. I have a new email system on my computer now, and I had to send the food bank different meeting times, and they kept pinging me back, wanting to do them later, and I pinged back, no, I'm unavailable any day after 4 o'clock from this point forward. And the reason is I have to put a clock on it. And so we have to do the same things and realize we have to create time to where we can work on our goals. I don't care when that is. Or we have downtime. I don't like to give myself a lot of downtime because then all I think about is what I should be doing while I'm having downtime. But I've also learned one of the things that I didn't, that we'll get to, is that you have to also learn to give yourself the time to celebrate a win. And so, like, when we did the press launch of the Dream Center, that was such a whirlwind of a week. I never even took the time to enjoy what just happened. I never even watched my interviews on TV. The press was there, whatever. I didn't even take the time to enjoy it because I never valued, we have to take the time to enjoy the wins. And so my point is we just can't keep taking on pressure. Like, you have to learn, you have to learn boundaries. You have to learn when to say no. I have learned that just because someone wants to meet with me or schedule counseling with me, no. Because my time is valuable. And if I don't think that they're serious about change, then I'm not going to give you my time. My time is valuable. And so people will say, hey, do you want to do this? I had somebody have a couple leadership things coming up. They have to go teach leadership at churches. And I said, okay, great. And then someone said, hey, will you come preach your revival? I said, no. Why? I said, because it's not in my lane. I'm not an evangelist. I'm not coming there to try to start a fire when I need one at my church. I knew when to say no to. And so that's what I said earlier about sometimes there's more opportunity for us than there is really of us to go around. And so there's a number of things. We have to have the structure. We have to have, we have to know our limits. Part of the reason that earlier on years ago, I'd say yes to anything. You want to go preach at this youth thing? You want to preach at this senior citizens church? You want to come sing at our church? You want to do this? Will you lead worship? Will you do the yes. Now it's no. And people who know me or are close to me know, and before they'll even ask that, I'm going to say no, because they know if I believe it's in my lane, I'll do it. If I don't, no. Because if it's not where I'm called, and I think that's a big part of the reason we end up under so much pressure is we're handling things that we're not called to handle. People are trying to pass them off to us because they, too, are desperate for help. But just because you're desperate for help doesn't mean I'm going to take your weight because I'm not called to do it, right? Because if I'm not called to do it, I'll do more damage than I'll even be a help. Am I answering your question? I'm trying to go the long way around, but there's a lot to your answer. Your answer is basically taking everything I gave you tonight and putting it in place, putting a clock on your life to the degree that there was a time where I had certain individuals that would call, and I would spend 45 minutes on the phone listening because they would not shut up. So we implemented a protocol, which I still utilize to this day when I know I'm going to be on a call with a certain individual or certain ones that are long-winded, don't know when to shut up. They're not a listener. They always want to be heard, and they want your advice, but they won't shut up long enough to listen. So I answer the phone. Hello. Hey, Pastor, I'm like, hey, are you busy? I'm like, well, actually, I am. I've got 30 minutes. So I can talk to you, but I can only talk to you for 30 minutes. I still do that to this day. Because there are some people that they'll take an hour and a half on the phone, and then they'll shut up, and then they'll want you to spend another hour and a half talking to them while they can ask. No. It is 8:30 at night, and my phone I don't answer after 9 o'clock. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Text me after that or text me before that, you'll probably wait till the next day, unless I'm feeling generous, right? The truth of the matter is my time is valuable, and now you just intruded in on my chill time that I have, the little that I take at night. No, you got 30 minutes. And the reason I put a clock on it is to let them know there's a demand. I keep it fun for them, but really for me, I'm just like, thank you, Lord. Lord, speak. Yeah. All right, well, I'm just about out of time, so I hate to interrupt you. I'm just about out of time, but I wanted to share this with you because my time is valuable. And I need people to also understand. And as leaders, you have to let people know there's more than just you that need me, right? And so if you're going to take up 3 hours of my night on the phone, guess what? I don't have time to call nobody else because I just gave it all to you, right? So boundaries, putting the clock on it, setting time limits, right? All of those things.